performance poets are writers too. And I'd like to thank the Writers Festival and its sponsors, The Age. I get The Age delivered. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Love you, Felix.
I get The Age delivered. Now in my mid-40s, I thought I might give it a go. It comes all wrapped in plastic, resistant to the elements, resistant to such elements as tsunamis and blizzards and torrential rains and snow. It's like seriously wrapped in plastic. Even on a sunny day. Even in the middle of summer. Even in the middle of global warming. Headline warning about melting polar ice cap. I hack away at the plastic wrap like Dexter. 16 layers later and the paper surrenders and uncurls on the table, spilling news. Other people's sorrow. Other people's joys, other people's stories, other people's views. A ferry's gone down in Honduras, NATO summit starts tomorrow. Family returns back to the black and corrugated shell that was once their home. Keine, Zeitung, Tisch. I take the paper out the back, I like to sit alone and read the news. My father would hold the paper in his hand and gently slice through the thin brown paper band with his thumbnail, and we'd hear it burst and fall and sprawl across the table, divvied out across the brilliant wreckage of a Sunday morning breakfast, devoured. Sports and charts for the older boys, travel or fashion or something equally unthreatening for mum. And cartoons for me. The fun day morning times. The paper instructing each of us on the kind of family we were expected to be and that we almost were sometimes, though never that convincingly. Keine, Zeitung, Tisch. Right until Dad's final cup of coffee, we would sit, showered and dressed with our iron serviettes and our best Sunday tablecloth, practising our German. Or laughing at Dad's version of English, how he walked into a chemist and asked for a comb. A what? A comb. A what? A comb! The comb for my hair! Keine, Zeitung, Tisch. No newspaper at the breakfast table. Only after breakfast, amidst the wreckage of the egg-smeared dishes and the jam-smeared labels, we would try, some more convincingly than others, to act out our parts as cast by the Sunday Telegraph. Mum might smile at the lifestyle page, her mind already at work though, with what to cook and peel and sew and knitting jumpers that we take about a week to lose. The endless and the thankless task. She'd look through the social news like a particularly polite alien who nods and smiles but really is a million miles away. My brothers too would argue through the sports and albums and the charts, the chisels and the windies, and the football season starts next week, but even then, less than convincing. They'd soon ask to be excused, taking only the implements that had verifiably been used as an immediate part of their breakfast activities, avoiding altogether the awkward ownership issues of bread or butter or the more general no man's land clutter of breakfast. Only my father took to the news like a monk. A monasteric calmness would consume him as he flicked through the pages and nodded his way through the week. And I, on my final dregs of jam and toast soldiers and soft-boiled eggs, not wanting to speak, would read Ginger Meg's 10 times. His eyes are just circles and lines. The ridiculous capers and simpleton storylines as Dad using his eggshell as an ashtray and me picking the last bits off mine would both sit in silence, nodding our way through the day. Keine, Zeitung, Tisch. I drink my coffee and look through the pages. South Sudan in the early stages of independence. The ridiculous capers and simpleton storylines of Australian politicians. I flick back and forwards between the tales of Asian market and carpet liquidation sales and allow myself to be drawn into worlds of sadness and joy. Sadness and joy. Abalone divers and earthquake survivors and sadness and joy. Sadness and joy. Credit crunch ratings and racing car drivers, unseasonable mating habits for possums and those who observe them at 4 in the morning. They climb out of bed to watch possums fuck, apparently. I don't know how it's done. A Perth truck driver kills his best friend's son while reversing up the driveway. Just one of those things. The smell of diesel lingers in the Fremantle dawn, just backing out the driveway. A chance in a million. No one to blame. He just fell apart. Nothing's been the same again. Nothing is stable. Nothing is as fragile as a Sunday morning breakfast table, picking bits of eggshell and silence and shoes. Pictures of shoes, floating or found or burnt or abandoned, the froth and the flotsam of any disaster, an empty shoe by the burnt-out corpse of a car or a building, a freedom march, 200 shot in a failed uprising. Overnight they cleared the council with government bulldozers. In the morning there was nothing but a shoe, a single shoe. A ferry sinks, 100 villagers go about their trade and treading day, a single shoe washed on the shore that somehow stands in for their useless tangled feet. The fire tears a house apart, a family returns, and the Mediterranean bites its bottom lip and spits its blood into the sea. A bear eats someone's daughter. Nothing speaks of the loss of sudden life or death or slaughter like the empty presence of shoes. I lick my thumb and turn the page. A dog swallowed an engagement ring. The dams are at 60%. The endless, relentless parade of news, and coffee is good for you, red wine is bad, and the whole world is heaving with sadness and joy. Sadness and joy. And all I can think of is me as a boy sitting across from my father. Both of us in silence. As the sun creeps crumb by crumb across the cleared white tablecloth, I try to count how many pages he has left to read. Keine, Zeitung, no, Tisch. Hager the horrible undertaking some ridiculous deed, some horrible comical violence. A Sunday morning edges away, picking at bits of marmalade and sharing in silence with my father. And I think of his father before him. Or maybe even his father before, as they read about the destruction of Berlin, a possible early end to the war, or the importance of staying the course, making critical progress, moving forward. When Berlin was bombed, so my grandmother said, the bicycle was king. The roads were rubble and phones were down and nobody anywhere knew anything. Keine, Zeitung, Tisch. It took them days to walk across the ruined city just to find out who else was alive. Did their family survive? Is it worse where you are or better? And I think about the bicycles, carrying letters and fragmenting scraps of news, comforting words or confirming fears, bits of paper listing out who's missing and who's dead, little lists of paper telling of sadness and joy. Sadness and joy. Now coffee is bad for you, red wine is good. And Tibby the cat sits by my foot and my coffee is warm and the sun creeps over the backyard. Crumbs are carried by ants and I turn the pages and I glance inside to where Ben practices his German, drinking tea and silently mouthing, Das ist der Tisch, das ist die Zeitung. I haven't always had it delivered. I've bought my paper in railway stations in between the Pawn and the Cape Decoration magazine. Backpackers in foreign locations fighting over the newspaper like seagulls, reading about club relocations and football results and sports syndications and what's going on in Coronation Street. And what's happening in Parliament and who's Prime Minister this week. The paper's reminding all of us of the things we once found important, the things we probably should find important, to see ourselves reflected. Told who we're supposed to be, identify our shadow somehow. Again, the paper is pulling me, and I find that I'm drawn into every story, every disgrace, every glory, obscurely famous celebrities and the poorly attended political rallies. I see I'm reflected in statues erected in public squares of European cities connected to the underground movements in World War II, and pirates and poets and play school presenters and dinosaur footprints. I find I'm reflected in newly elected prime ministers and small Pacific nations and sheep farmers and dust-covered faces on cattle stations, and families returning to their burnt-out houses, and communities turning to violence, and Catholic Church silence. The girl being attacked by a bear calls her mother on her mobile phone, and over the sound of crunching bone she tells her that she's sorry. It goes on for an hour. The bear apparently wasn't that hungry. All these things can happen. I remember I read about girls somewhere who were similarly attacked by a bear and they all started to run, but the bear followed one who was trying to escape on her bicycle. And she's riding for dear life through the forest track and she feels the bear gaining on her and her back and she veers off the path and toward a tree and she jumps off the bike, not knowing that he was actually a bicycle riding bear who had escaped from a circus across town. And he picked up the bike and continued to ride down the road, hugging his mum as he went, and all these things can happen. St Kilda can win and Obama can lose and a man reads paper. Man reads news as cat strokes leg and dog barks in the distance and Ben learns German. Uprisings meet with resistance and coffee grows cold. A new planet is found and man grows older, watched by his son, and no one grows wiser. We're all just distracted from the obvious fact that everything's happening. Everything's happening. Everything's happening to everyone. I see the family returning back from the station. Aunt Maureen's not been the same since the operation. She forgets people's names and she tends to get impatient with the young ones who stand there and stare at her scar. And she holds a crochet blanket in the back of the car and she looks at her house like a stranger. And the men kick the footings and stumps and foundations, agree there's probably no immediate danger of the whole thing coming down. And the kids are amazed with the random power that somehow something like the swing could survive while the kennel and carport and kitchen are gone. And everything's not where it should be. The bedroom is on the veranda, and cans of beef are on the front lawn, and a single shoe, forlorn and unworn, is lodged in the branch of a tree. And the dog chain's still tied to the hills hoist. There's a hessian sack over the body. And Aunt Maureen sits in the car, and all she smells is burning. The helicopter flies overhead, and the headline says, "Returning family, returning." Dad flicks the paper. The final stages, a glance over the financial pages, all that now remains of Sunday morning. I scan the dregs of the Fun Day Times and see my chance. Dad, why don't lions eat clowns? He looks up. Because they taste funny. He looks down. Folds the paper, smiles and gets up and goes. And I count to 10 and tear into the neighbourhood and catch up with the news. The Wickens' dog killed a cat last night and his nan just walks around in a 90 and Bradley's putting your handlebars on his BMX bike and his tooth came out in that fight where he met Grant Newland down by the river and their dog bit his brother and those Newland boys are always up to no good and the whole world is turning in my neighbourhood with sadness and joy. Sadness and joy. I fold up the paper and head in the house. Ben's practising German. Cup of tea, voice die Zeitung. Here's der Tisch. The cat strokes my leg. I make another coffee. Coffee is good for you. Red wine is good for you. Everything's good for you. It's all okay. We're only human. At the end of the day, wild bears still roam and our children are taken. We're bones and we're bacon. We're gristle and foam. We lose ourselves in all this news that we're making. We need to remember to find our way home again. Need to remember to find our way home. Our houses burn down and we're constantly breaking. We dream and we fear and we mourn and we wish and we lose ourselves in all this news we keep making. We need to remember Keine, Zeitung am Tisch. It's from time to time. Keine, Zeitung am Tisch. Thank you.